Welcome again to the Binteger podcast. So excited to invite you on today's podcast. My name is Binny. I'm the host. This is the place where integrity calls and wholeness manifests. I think I figured out in the preparation for this podcast that tagline. I was looking for the right words. Words are really important to me. I really appreciate well-placed words, and I like the discipline of thinking carefully about the sequence and the presentation of ideas in a sentence and which word is going to go first or next. And so I've been mulling over the tagline for this podcast, Z Binteger's podcast. And so far, I've just been working with where integrity calls and wholeness responds or answers, but that just didn't seem to capture what I was trying to get. But in the preparation for today's podcast and tomorrow's, which is a two-parter, by the way, I came to feel into this final word that sort of makes it feel complete for me. So Z Binteger's podcast, where integrity calls and wholeness manifests. Yeah, that feels like what I'm trying to convey. And so I'm super excited about that. And I'm going to hit on those themes as we carry on through today's and the next podcast after this one here, because they go hand in hand. We're talking today about overcoming insecurities by embracing integrity. If you haven't already guessed, integrity is a big deal, especially as we focus on it in this podcast here. This is the substance that makes this podcast exist in the first place. Explorations into integrity, not only from an ideological perspective, but also very much from a practical perspective. How do we not only talk about it and try to understand it, but how do we also move into it and experience it? And as today's title suggests, how do we embrace it? How do we subsume ourselves in it? How do we get lost in it? How do we make it such a big deal? And that is my contribution in this podcast that I hope will serve you, my dear Bintegers who are listening in, and those who are also tagging along for the sake of interest. So thrilled to have you on this podcast today with me. Let me do a quick feelings check-in, because that's how I usually begin this podcast. I carve out just a little few moments to be able to practice what integrity looks like for me in the moment by being honest with how I'm feeling. And this because for the longest time, I just didn't ever feel safety to express what I was feeling. But do you know it's a beautiful thing to be able to be aware of your feelings, to savor them, to experience them on purpose, even if they're uncomfortable? It's nothing to write home about when you're having amazing, great experiences, like you're happy, excited, or all those good things. But it's even more intentional when you can hone in on the experiences in life when they are uncomfortable, when they're challenging, when you can look at them and say, there you are, I see you, and I'm going to spend some time with you. I'm going to make you my friend, basically, as you get accustomed to it. And so that's a really important part of what we're doing. So in this moment, how am I feeling? In this moment, I am feeling supremely excited, excited about, it sounds weird. I'm excited to be talking about our theme today as we're addressing insecurities, overcoming insecurities. Why would I be excited about that? I'd be excited just because I've come a long way since I started this journey some years back. I've learned some significant things. I've been in this space where I feel like I know what I'm talking about, not because it's theoretical and I'm like, I've heard it works this way. I feel excited because I've experienced the progression that I'm about to lay out for you. And it has brought me tremendous joy and freedom to engage in life. And I want now to extend that to share with you so that you might find your freedom and liberation from insecurities as well. So transformation is at the very heart of what drives me on this podcast, but I'm so excited today and as I'm about to present this stuff. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm supremely excited and giddy. Yes, this stuff really means a lot to me. How are you, my dear Bintegers? Let me read a few descriptive words on emotions that may help to serve you. These are the unpleasant category of emotions that I cover, as well as pleasant emotions. The unpleasant ones are what you might be feeling should your needs or desires or longings not be fulfilled. So there might be someone who's frightened or worried, surprised, stressed, or embarrassed. Again, frightened, worried, surprised, stressed, and embarrassed. And in the positive emotions category, when your feelings, your needs, your emotions, your longings are being attended to in a way that serves you well, you might be feeling open-hearted. You might be feeling pleased, perhaps satisfied, comfortable, or rejuvenated. Oh, that's a good word. You might be feeling open-hearted, pleased, satisfied, comfortable, or rejuvenated. Again, as I say always, may these words find some receptacle in your heart for you to tuck away, to be pulled back out when the feeling just fits and you're like, this is what it is right now. So let's dive into our theme of overcoming insecurities by embracing integrity. One of the commitments or convictions I have presently is that you're going to know when you have been freed from the power of your insecurities, when you are able to revisit them and they have no more power over you. Let me say it again. You'll know that you have moved on from your insecurities that you're presently struggling with. You'll know that you've left them in the rearview mirror in a really appropriate way when you're able to go back to those experiences and relive them, and they have no more power over you. For most of us, what happens is we're bound to this place of whenever we revisit those insecurities or those experiences or those things that are in our past that feed into our insecurities. Whenever we revisit them, we're still captured in that very moment of whatever uncomfortable and unhelpful effect it leaves on us. And we're still very much in its power, and it makes it really difficult for us to go back to. But when we work through our insecurities, when we hone in and focus on our insecurities, and we systematically work our way through them, there is a way that you eventually start to see the power of those insecurities diminish over time, to the point that one day you'll find yourself looking at them and saying, oh yeah, I see it, but I've moved on from it. I acknowledge that it's there and it's my past and it's part of my history, but now it has no more power or effect over me. That is what I hope you can see as a possibility in your future if you haven't already experienced it. The only way to get to this point is by embracing your integrity, embracing your awareness and discovery of what your values are, embracing what it looks like to start aligning your actions with your values, embracing what it looks like for you to be true to yourself, and embracing how you can also honor others to figure out their own stuff while you're working on your stuff. The only way to get to this point is when you embrace integrity for yourself. Let me see if I can define insecurities, just so we know what we're talking about here. For me, insecurities are a subjective perception. It's a very subjective perception. It's your own awareness of how you're experiencing this. It's a subjective perception of being flawed or not measuring up to certain standards or expectations, whether internally or externally. I do a podcast also for kids with my puppet Molly. We have such a great time on that podcast. And I'll be addressing insecurities as well. But the way I would explain it to a kid is the feeling you have inside when you don't feel like you're good enough. That's what resonates with me when I think of defining what an insecurity is. Now, these insecurities manifest themselves in many various ways. It could be related to your physical appearance, your abilities perhaps, something to do with your intelligence or lack thereof. Your social status might be a significant part of what your insecurities manifest themselves as. Relationships are not even relationships are very much affected by our insecurities. And for so many of us, this sense of feeling worthy or worthwhile is at the very heart. Now, insecurities can often be triggered by past experiences, perhaps some social pressures that we've gone through, very much driven by the way we compare ourselves to other people, like the comparing yourself. And I was susceptible to this just a few days ago, and I had to work through that. And that's so rare. My friends, as I was processing this insecurity with many of my friends, they were really surprised because they're like, Benny, we don't see you ever in the zone of lacking confidence in who you are. And the fact that I was sharing this was very surprising, but I'm not, I'm prone as well to these insecurities, right? And even the internalizing beliefs that we have, the stories that we tell ourselves of how we're not good enough. These are all things that could trigger what those insecurities and the way that they manifest are. And so it's really helpful to be aware. Our insecurities have such an effect on us, don't they, dear listener? They affect us to the core, if you will. Like it almost affects the way that our self-esteem is, the confidence that we walk about in life with. Do you know, for the longest time, for years actually, I did not walk around with confidence, even though people would have thought I was the most confident individual. I walked without confidence because of my insecurities. I was bound by my insecurities that inhibited my ability to show up on purpose and to say to the world, here I am, and I'm here on purpose. It affects even our overall well-being, doesn't it? And this, of course, leads to many behaviors that are troublesome and that contradict and undermine what it looks like for us to walk with integrity. Things like trying to find validation with others, and so choosing actions that are opposed to our values, perhaps, or comparing ourselves, or that feeling of self-inadequacy. So I don't think there's anyone who does not experience insecurities. In fact, I think all of us experience insecurity. So it's very much a normal part of what it means to be a human being. It's not the kind of thing we need to be beating ourselves over and saying, oh, we're terrible, we're awful and worthless. No, insecurities, it's very much a normal human experience, and one worth normalizing and making space for, saying, hey, when it happens, this is just our humanity on display. That's okay. Let's work through it. Let's proceed. Now, working on our personal insecurities. Listen carefully, my dear listener. I want to capture you at this moment, especially your attention. Working on our personal insecurities is absolutely essential, because when we do so, it leads us to address the very things that undermine our pursuit of walking with integrity. Another way of saying it is, insecurities lead to behaviors that really compromise our integrity, or our ability to walk with or walk in integrity. Does this make sense? When we facilitate space for our insecurities, we don't have much space to work on. What does it look like for us to be individuals of integrity, individuals that are marked by integrity? When we accommodate our insecurities, we don't have much space or bandwidth for growing in integrity. So when we work on our insecurities, when we address our insecurities, when we start systematically working on resolving these insecurities that manifest in some devastating and detrimental ways, we're able to start seeing more space being opened up for us now to start walking into and experiencing and practicing what it looks like for us to walk with integrity, what it looks like for us to become aware of what our values that we subscribe to are, what it looks like for us to start doing the hard work of aligning our actions with our values that we have. And so there's this process that is necessitated when we're thinking about why we should even be considering the courageousness it takes to address our insecurities. So by addressing and working on our insecurities, we're promoting that self-growth, we're promoting that awareness, that self-acceptance that facilitates an understanding of what our values are, and we were practicing how to become more honest with ourselves, how to become more authentic with ourselves, as we're saying, what is the real radar of where I'm at right now? And it enables us really to start making decisions that align with our true selves, and to be aware of those decisions that we'd been making for such a long time, because we were driven by the fear of what our insecurities were proposing. We were believing that story or narrative a lot more compellingly. So I'm hoping that this has been a nice primer, this first part here, this on this 28th episode of the Bintegers podcast. I'm hoping this has been a nice primer for me to convey to you and to convince you, one, to acknowledge your insecurities, to say, okay, I acknowledge I've got my insecurities. I'm not going to keep sweeping them under the carpet. I'm going to see them for what they are. I'm going to start honing in on addressing what does it look like for me to start now working through my insecurities, so that I can start transitioning and transforming, so I can become something new. On the next podcast, to this one here, on the 29th podcast, I'm going to be focusing on the how. How can we actually start working on our insecurities? How can we start seeing that transformation? What kind of steps should we be taking to work through our insecurities so that they diminish and our ability for experiencing integrity increases? I am so driven by seeing transformation for y'all in the way that I've come to experience it for myself. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Can't wait till the next one. Bye for now.